let's talk about what you just mentioned now. And I've seen you posting on social media a lot over the past few months and years, because there has been a rise in mainstream content putting out material that depicts, often in a critical light, the Orthodox world. What do you consider to be some of the most common portrayals of Orthodox Judaism that you find to be objectionable and wrong? And would you agree that they often tend to be really among the ultra-Orthodox community in the way they are perceived? And to what extent, because I know, for example, I mean, I haven't watched it myself, but people that talk about this Netflix series Shtisel, they say in some ways it's quite endearing, parts of the Orthodox life that's portrayed there. But to what extent are some of the conceptions actually, maybe based on the fact that there are some elements and pockets of extremism in parts of the ultra-Orthodox community, as there would be in any religious community?
So I would say the depictions usually are like one of three categories. One is cartoonish, where it's just sort of someone, with a glued on beard and payas and, kind of the gag rabbi type of figure, who's not actually a complete human. And if we consider the rise in anti-Semitic attacks and the fact that people that look like that are especially the ones being punched, anytime that someone is not portrayed as a complete human, we have to sort of worry about how that leads to, the effects beyond that. And you could take any other minority community where they're sort of reduced to tropes or jokes. It's a very similar idea, Asian, Black, anything like that. There's another category where it's the extremist Orthodox Jew. And what I would say is that, of course, we have extremists, dysfunctional people, abusive people within our community. We're now working, one of our branches, you mentioned our media branch, which we've now named Keter, to restore the Keter Shem Tov to the religious community. We have another branch that you referred to repair the issues, the systemic issues, called Tikkun. There's a third one you did not touch on, which is called Makom, and that's to help the displaced Haredi Jews within the community.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. We'll...
Yes, so working with that community, the reason I want to reference that now is because working with that community, what we can see now, 6.5 years since we launched that branch, hundreds of members later, these are stories of dysfunction. Now, the sad thing is that when you live in a dysfunctional household, you believe that this is just life. So if you're a dysfunctional Christian, a dysfunctional atheist, a dysfunctional Jew, a dysfunctional Muslim, you will believe that this is just how most households run. And most people don't realize that they're sort of steeped in dysfunction. That's number one. Number two, you can have loving parents that are hardworking and try to do their best, but because they have attachment wounds and were raised in dysfunction, they don't even realize what they're passing on to you. When you're raised in dysfunction, as we've seen with many of our Mako members, what it creates is a lack of secure attachment. And so you don't feel like you're part of your identity. You don't feel like you belong in your home. You don't feel fully held, seen, heard. And so you want to run away. You want to escape. And so what that ends up looking like, if you're raised as a very religious Jew, is that you want to escape from your Jewish identity. And these are the stories, I believe, that get to the media. And so if you sort of take a couple steps back, it's actual real life dysfunctional stories that are based on human characteristics and nothing specifically Jewish. But when a Jewish person does something dysfunctional, it often has Jewish things sort of woven into them. The person is raised believing this is Judaism itself, runs from the community. We're a people that creates a lot of content, just, overrepresented, within the Jewish community. Those stories then make it to books, TV shows, movies. And then you take the secular Jews in Hollywood that are only so happy to amplify those stories. What those stories do essentially reinforces to them that they're living the better life, that their choice to be secular and not feel any guilt about being less religious is a fine choice, because those religious Jews are crazy, backwards, all the things wrong with the community. And so then there's this sort of like loop that just keeps on happening, where those bad stories keep coming out. But as we said at the beginning, there is truth to them in some cases. That's just not normative Orthodox Jews or Orthodoxy. Those are the families that need help.
So the misconceptions or tropes about Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox Jews are based on falsehoods that things that occur within all communities are somehow more generic and commonplace among Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox Judaism. Is that a fair characterization?
I'll give you an example. Julia Hartenmein, Orthodox Life. She talks about being silenced in her community. In her memoir, she has a piece of duct tape over her mouth. So you could have a dysfunctional home where the kids don't feel like they have a voice. How do mom and dad show the kids they don't have a voice? If the kid tries to, say something, talk back, the parents give them a certain look. They shoot them down. They create an environment where everyone's walking on eggshells. There are certain dynamics of relationships, of parent-children relationships, where a kid could feel voiceless in their own home. There are plenty of very much outspoken ultra-Orthodox women, people that this woman grew up with, that didn't have any experience similar to hers. But it feels very true when you're living in that dynamic. It's just that people don't realize that what they're living through is a human thing and not a Jewish thing. Now, look, what can end up happening is that because the Orthodox community does revere leadership and listening, if you weren't taught to have a voice and taught to advocate for yourself and taught that within your control is choosing your own rabbi, that's part of how the system is baked in. Aseh lecha rav, choose for yourself a rabbi, and you live within a framework where everything is chosen for you, it can feel like the laws themselves control you as opposed to being a person that lives a self-actualized life. I choose every day to put on my wig, to, say blessings before I eat, to observe the Sabbath. Nobody is forcing me to do that. If I was in a situation where I felt like if I stepped out of line, I would no longer be loved, I would, lose important things in my life, I would start to have a very different feeling about Judaism at that point, because it wouldn't be coming out of choice or positivity or love. I would be observing out of duress. And so those real situations do occur. But again, that's not a specifically Jewish thing. There are parents that if the kid doesn't become a doctor, they cut them off. They have certain visions of what the kid is supposed to be and not supposed to be. And so these models exist within humanity. But we see a lot of these stories as specifically Orthodox ones when it's just what a dysfunctional Orthodox story would look like.